of bees, and the immunity of bees is deteriorating as well. And this work basically it's based on the idea what would happen if all bees had died. And this led me to create a project in Dubravica, which is a village in central Slovakia, where there is a very interesting artist residence program called Periphery Centers, or Centers at the Periphery. And I created an object which reminds us of a spaceship, but it also serves as a beehive. So it should serve as a beehive. So did the community want to establish or basically start a beehive, and they invited you to do so? That's correct. Yeah. I've read somewhere that the entire project then failed in a way. Basically, the object is empty. Yes, unfortunately, what happened there was that for some personal reasons, the community in Dubravica was not able to basically keep bees. Of all the people who wanted to be beekeepers, only one remained, and he actually found out that he's severely allergic to bees. So this remained as an empty object, which used to be frequented by children who used it as a playground. And now it's placed close to the place of the artisan residence program. But what I had in mind, when my aim was to create a fictional history that sort of permeates the area, to have one person, a persona of a cosmonaut, of an astronaut who wants to save his bees. And he actually wrote a story based on this, which was later on published under the Apart label, and in cooperation with Transit SK. That's correct. Basically, the story here, you can see a map that was sort of created to accompany the story, which is completely made up and fictional. You can see the sun in the center, and on one hand side you have the Earth, and then we have a beekeeper and an astronaut who believes that there is a planet B, so another Earth that is unpolluted, and that would allow us to live there, where there would be conditions for life. It's also generated some other works, because which sort of form a mosaic together. Here, just for an illustration, purposes, I'm sorry that the list is in English, but maybe you would understand at least some of you. This is a list of the major crops. Definitely this is not an exhaustive list, but a list of some of the crops that are directly used by people, the crops that basically need to be pollinated by bees in order to grow and germinate. So this gives us an idea of what the world would be like if we didn't have bees, what we would lose. And obviously this is a detail, but when we're talking, if we're talking of bees, then we have to say that the pollination is not only done by bees, and we know we have bees, hermits, but we also have butterflies and other animals or species that help with pollination. And this is a 3D visualization of the list that we had at the previous slide. This is basically a helmet of that astronaut, as if the bees were sort of buzzing and humming inside of his head. So you can see the names of the crops and plant species that are pollinated by bees printed inside of this helmet. I believe This was introduced at your Seoul exhibition in County Gallery in 2016, and the entire exhibition hosted a number of objects which sort of communicated together, completing the story. Wasn't there something else? Didn't we have another slide there? No, I don't think so, but maybe we can add something here. Maybe the slide that you're missing will somehow come back later on. Basically, what I want to say is that the entire project sort of reached its climax by the publication of the work, of the book that you talked about. It's actually called Mirrorland, which is a work of fiction, novelette, telling a story of the beekeeper. Was it only published in English, in Slovak, or was it also translated into English? It was actually only published in English. And it's thanks to Apart and Magda Szeriova, the designer, it is done in a very nice way, and you can basically unfold each page so that you can choose, being a reader, you can choose whether you're just reading the story, so the text part, or you can actually see it as a picture story, a story told in pictures. And the book is still available, if I'm not mistaken, says Petra. So this is if you're interested, you can look for it. This is a Chopin gallery, art gallery, and this is the exhibition, I believe, from 2016. And this brings me back to Portugal. You stay in Portugal and the Cape Verde Islands. Perhaps you're better positioned to talk about it, but I have to say that this project is so close to my heart that I always like to talk about it, and I'm sure I'm not going to be exhaustive, but the name was Agudi Tuba LVA, which basically means Rainwater Limited. And here, this basically brings us to the environmental topics and the impact that the climate change bring about. The Cape Verde Islands, basically, there's almost no rainfall because of the climate change. And this poses great problems in the field of agriculture, or I don't know if they don't even have problems with drinking water, with sweet water. I'm sure you'll tell us more. This is sort of a utopian project, but I think many of your projects are sort of utopian. This is almost like an attempt to bring back water to the Cape Verde Islands. Could you tell us more, maybe, and where's the link, how it is linked to Portugal and your time there? This work of art is a result of a long-term project called Archipelago, where I try to see the links between Portugal and Cape Verde Islands. Cape Verde Islands used to be a Portugal colony, and until these days, there are very extensive links between the two countries, and many people from the Cape Verde Islands hope to emigrate to Portugal. Many of them then continue either to the US or other countries. But basically for them, Portugal is sort of gateway into Europe. And this is obviously also caused by the fact that they speak the language. And I think you basically got close to the community when you stayed in Lisbon. You visited people from the Cape Verde Islands, the community from Cape Verde Islands, or do I remember it well? And that actually got you to Cape Verde Islands, and there you started looking into the problem. Yeah, I visited Guatemala quarter neighborhood in Lisbon, which is inhabited by people from the Cape Islands, and I started working there at my work of art, and I looked at the emigration problem, but when we talk about the Cape Islands, it's especially the Santiago Island where the migrants were coming from. As Petra said, there's a big problem with drought in the Cape Islands, on the Cape Islands. So this is the adverse impact of the climate change. But the Cape Islands basically had problem with rainfall for a long time now. They have dry and less dry years. And for some time I worked in a village community there, and there it was very visible what's the impact of the drought and the lack of water on an everyday life, on everyday routines. Obviously, if you had farmers aim to plant crops and basically make a living off the harvest. And if the year is extremely dry or dry as such, then they have to look for alternative sources of or alternative ways how to put bread on the tables. And as Petra said, the work that basically resulted from this from this period of time in my life, basically depicts the struggle of people from the Cape Islands, and they're working very hard, usually sending money back to their relatives still living in the Cape Islands. And I got an idea that it seemed almost like they were trying to bring the water back to the Cape Islands. And this resulted in this idea of a boat. And I actually didn't make this boat myself, but it was made by one of the migrants living in the community, in the Cape community in Lisbon. So you can see the vessel, but also there are basically containers with water. And if you look at the suspension system, this basically is or depends on the water, because we had the containers, the bucket with water that were used as a counterweight to keep the boat suspended in the air. And if this water was gone, then the boat would not survive, because it would fall and perhaps come to an end. So this was also an attempt to show the sensitivity of the ecosystem and the vulnerability of the ecosystem. At the bottom part of the slide, at the bottom of the slide, you can also see a picture from the video that you've made directly. It's one of several videos that you've shot directly at one of the Cape Islands that accompanied the exhibition. Yes, I wanted to show this specific picture, because when you asked about the real situation in the Cape Islands concerning water, obviously it's very difficult to plant something and to grow crops if you have to water it with basically water taken from the well. So, rainfall is really daily expected. But here you can see sort of an everyday ritual where the entire village actually convenes in front of the communal well, which is in the blue building, and they're basically waiting there for water. And if I remember well, you also very symbolically you placed corn seedlings or corn plants in the window. Yes, corn is one of the main crops grown in the Cape Islands. It goes together with, I think it's beans, corn, and piña. And for me, it was very interesting because the way they plant these three crops together, it's called Three Sisters, and it basically follows the methods, planting and agricultural methods used by native American native people, native tribes. Okay, let's move on. This is a work of art that I created quite recently. I think it was 2017, maybe 18. I'm not really sure. And it's called a concert for ABC Glacier in Georgia. This is not the first concert for nature. I have a series of very simple works where I play for a part of nature that catches my attention. I play to the nature, not to the sort of live audience. And here in this picture, you can see how the area covered by the glacier shrunk, how it downsized in the period of 20 to 30 years. And the entire video that I made there is strengthened with the video of water running out from the glacier. Underneath the glacier, you can see streams and puddles and even small rivers. And it is very fascinating to see the strength of water leaving the area. And it was also very interesting to see that at the places where we used to stay overnight, the locals had taps with water that they never closed. So the water was running continuously. And, you know, the feeling, it evoked a feeling in me that the locals thought that water is eternal, that they can never run out of it. But seeing the shrinking of the glacier, it's clear that we are losing water. You can interrupt me if you have any questions. No, I think this is very, very clear. I think that was done very well because you can see the links the links with the environmental topics and issues very, very clearly. But perhaps there's one thing that I would like to hear about. When you went to Georgia, was it a part of some bigger project or? No, not really. I usually plan my work ahead, and I usually plan accordingly. But this was an exception when, together with my friends, we basically went on a hike. And just one day before we came to the glacier, I searched for the information, and I found that it's actually the true story that the glacier is shrinking. So I decided to stay there for longer and record the concert for the glacier there. And perhaps the symbolic value accompanying it is the fact that it was quite a challenge for me to record the concert. All my friends had to wait for me. We didn't have much time, but at the moment that I finished the concert, basically all hell broke loose, and there was a strong storm and hail. Now, let's move on. This is a work of mine which is perhaps closely and most directly related to environmental activism. It's called Back Where I Belong, and I was approached by climate change activists or group of activists, Climate This Is Us, or Climate Is Us, which is a group of activists that convenes regularly close to coal mines. And I was asked to prepare some sort of work of art. Originally, when they first approached me, I wasn't able to do it. But later on, I created a costume of Mr. Coal, or Mr. Carbon, if you want. This is what we are, we like to call it. And basically, it's the symbol of the coal not wanting to be burned, but basically getting back to where it belongs and where it has been for thousands of years. And it needs to be said that as it applies to the Czech Republic, very strongly also to Poland, and partially also to Slovakia, burning of fossil fuels, burning of coal is one of the worst options for energy production. And in Slovakia recently we had an attempt to, or the talk started about closing one of the lignite mines. And even though this is one of the, it doesn't have a high proportion, it doesn't play a big role in the production of energy in terms of the national production, closing down of the mine can actually reduce Slovak emissions, national emissions, by even some 6%. Okay, I think this means that we can move on, but here still we have Mr. Coal, Mr. Carbon, going back to where it belongs. The mine that I talked about, the lignite mine in Slovakia, was the mine in Nováky. And there was a protest organized there by Greenpeace back in 2018, and this was a major turning point in climate activism in Slovakia, because prior to that, basically there was a complete silence there. And here, basically, we used this costume of Mr. Coal, Mr. Carbon, and we actually got him directly into the mine. This is the Nováky mine that I talked about. We had the activists climbed the tower, the mine tower, and unrolled the poster saying "End the Coal Age," and there were repercussions. Some of the activists actually were in prison. We also were taken by the police, but then they let us go. This had quite an interesting, basically after, or the developments afterwards, after this protest, were quite interesting because it received a lot of media attention. But at the same time, there were other things going on in Slovakia on that day. So perhaps the news did not resonate. But after the activists had been imprisoned for a number of days, there was a very strong public outcry to release the activists, and it actually sparked the public discussion about this. And it led actually to the pledge made by the Slovak government that this particular mine should be closed down by 2023 or 2024 at the latest. And it needs to be said that this mine is not profitable. It doesn't make profit. And we are even importing coal from Poland.
No vlastne to som sa chcela opýtať.
In order to basically have sufficient supplies for the power plant supplied from this mine. So that's even worse, that we actually even have to import the coal. All right, so let's move on. And this is perhaps also just for your interest. This work basically took a life of its own, which I'm very happy, because the work of art that started as something that started as a work of art, basically starting living its own life. The Czech activists actually kept this mascot and used it for various purposes. This is actually a protest in front of the Ministry of the Environment of the Czech Republic, where they tried to invite the minister for a Valentine's date with coal. I think the minister actually didn't show up. He didn't accept the invitation. And this is relatively a new work of art, if I'm not mistaken, when your aim was to make the car production plant disappear. We obviously don't want to make commercials, but it's the Jaguar Land Rover plant that was built next to the Slovak city of Nitra. And the way I look at, did you take a picture beforehand and then you painted it in your studio, and then you took the picture back to the countryside, to the very same spot, and then you basically had the plant disappear? And we can see basically a virgin land, a landscape untouched by a human activity. Why did you choose this very particular plant and this very particular car maker? There are two reasons for that. I have relatives in Nitra, and I went to see this place, or I visited this place several times on several occasions. I can remember when there still were no car production plant, and I like the landscape. And to me, there's sort of Mediterranean feel to it. So that's one of the reasons. The place basically caught my attention, and you could see a contrast between the breathtaking landscape and nature and a very strong intervention by a human being on a large-scale intervention, because it's not only the Land Rover plant, but also some suppliers and some other production halls and facilities. And you asked why Land Rover, because we have basically production of passenger cars is a symbol and a flagship of Slovak economy. From my point of view, it's a little bit controversial, but perhaps understandable, because it brings jobs. Of all the automotive plants that caught my attention, basically in case of Jaguar Land Rover, we're talking of SUVs, rather large and luxurious cars. And for me, it comes along with controversy. It's controversial, albeit poetic, to make a plant disappear, but I think for me it's clear why this is not okay. And also there were different factors. The plant was actually built on a very, very fertile land, and Nitra is located relatively close to the capital of Bratislava, and economically we're talking of a quite affluent region. So the question was why the plant was built there, when we have other regions in Slovakia where the impact, when we talk about the generation of jobs and the impact on the unemployment rate and reduction of unemployment rate, would be much more visible, much more significant. And did you also look into it further? Basically, most of the production of this plant goes for export because we don't have that many rich people that could afford to buy these cars. Yet some of the production or many of the plants are located in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, in Southern Eastern Europe, because we still have relatively cheap workforce, and a large part of production goes for export. And to me, it was quite interesting, and I don't want to compare brands, but my personal take is that if we talk of Kia and other brands and bigger Land Rover, I started thinking about whether basically an employee of this brand could afford to buy Land Rover or could afford the cars they're making. And the situation is different in, say, in Kia and in case of bigger Land Rover. I would like to also add that this is basically the latest of my works, and it has not been exhibited anywhere. I'm still working on it. And this basically takes me from my artistic activities to activism. Okay, here we are. This gets us to the issue concerning temporary art world and its relation to climate and to ecology as such. You still I quote by Gustav Metzger, who basically created
galeristov a tak ďalej, aby vlastne redukovali
concerning and addressing our art world, galleries, critics, painters, and artists, challenging them to limit and reduce their air travels. And you yourself are also trying to follow the trend, and you try to avoid flying if it only basically concerns some sort of short-term stay abroad. Is that correct? Am I right? Yes, I decided, and I think it was at least 2 years ago, that I decided not to fly. And I think I've flown enough already. So I think I've already made my ecological carbon footprint, and it's quite big, quite significant. But this is a symbolic move, but also basically, since we're entering quite a challenging topic concerning whether a human being as an individual should try to alter the way of life in order to minimize their footprint, carbon footprint, or whether it's better to transform the world and the society as such. Let me also say in our Artists in Residence program this year, the main topic is the links and how everything is interrelated, so that we all realize how we're linked and related, connected with our world, with our region, but also in the global measure. We need to start thinking globally and in global terms, and we're trying to invite the artists that somehow work with this topic or react to this topic. And I have to say that quite often I'm asking myself, what is it that I can do in order to improve the situation, at least not to deteriorate it, albeit with small steps. If I really need something that costs a few euro cents, but has to be transported by vast cargo ships for tens of thousands of kilometers. But having said that, what I want to say is that we all need to think about what it is that we can do ourselves, and I think it's a very complex issue and a problem. Yes, I'd like to get back to the quote by Gustav Metzger, he tries to point out that basically what he's talking about goes beyond the individual responsibility. When he's talking about the artist production, he's talking about toxic processes, the volume, the sheer volume of material used for the production of the work of art, or for the transportation, some of the timber, MDF, plywood used for the exhibitions, and some toxic materials. I think Metzger mainly talks about a huge, big, large-scale project like Art Fair. Art Fair is an event that lasts for 3 days, but it has enormous impact on ecology, because a number of work of art has to be transported. You need to build basically compartments for the works of art. The galleries are coming, installing the work of art for the artists that come afterwards. So this is an event which is rather short, but has a significant impact and carbon footprint. So I think that this is also something that we need to take into consideration. One of the things I'm trying to do myself is to live a more local way. Also, when it comes to my production of work and my artwork, I've perhaps abandoned the idea that I'll travel and exhibit at different continents. When you're talking about your work, artwork, in our artist in residence program, we can see that loads of materials are staying with us, and they start piling up after we have someone staying for 2-3 months. It all ends with an exhibition. But what we're left with are the piles of materials that, I don't want to say that it's a waste, because we still think that and hope we can find some use for it. But we have already started thinking about how we should deal with that. We basically already came up with an idea that 1 year we can have the artists only working with the things that we already have, that we've already created, to see whether we could actually create and come up with something that it's not only sort of didn't look like trash, but something that can transform this things that basically remained after other artists into a new work of art. Also, the Arts Fund, last year, the Arts Fund prepared manual or handbook, if you will, and I should have it somewhere here. It's called Environmental Measures, and it basically applies for each and every applicant for a subsidy by the Arts Fund. It mainly concerns the organizations. I don't know whether it applies directly to individual artists, maybe partly, but I think it's a good move that something like this actually was created, and I hope it really works, because it makes the organizations think more about things like transportation, perhaps even a duration of an exhibition, so that we avoid situation where we have very short or rather short exhibitions, and then you transport the work of art again to other place where you exhibit for a short time again. Yes, this is a very interesting topic, and I believe that it deserves an individual, a separate discussion, but it basically follows the trend of regrowth, or basically slowing down of the pace. And this is something that I can see in my case as well, and perhaps I'm not winning the battle at the moment, or not yet. We have learned to react to each and every incentive or offer and just produce new and more works that, however, very often just fulfill very short-term purpose. So perhaps it calls for the change of mind and mindset when we should focus more on quality than quantity, that we can have exhibitions that last for longer, that we can perhaps produce less and focus more on the quality of our lives, to, in a way, to live simpler life. And this is something that I included just for out of interest. When we were talking about the flights and the reduced air flight initiative, we know that the impact is quite high with the air traffic, but basically even the titanium white, which in terms of pigments is one of the less harmful, if I may say so, this also has an impact on the environment. And I've actually caught news about an affair that took place in 2018 at the Crimea. In front, you can see the lake, which is used, or into which the water from the plant producing titanium white for the entire Europe is released. So the polluted water is basically let into the lake, and for political reasons, the river was basically stopped, and as the water receded, harmful pollutants and harmful substances were released into the air, and they were so harmful that basically the authorities had to evacuate children living in the town nearby. And, you know, when we talked about individual responsibility, this is perhaps something that I cannot really grasp yet, because titanium white is one of the main pigments used, so it's difficult to reduce its usage. Another sort of similar case is cobalt blue, which is one of my favorite tones, but it has social and ecological implications, because cobalt is one of the precious minerals, which is mined mainly or predominantly in Congo, and apart from the extraction impacting agriculture and groundwaters and so on, it very often extraction of cobalt is also used, or the profits made of it, made from it, are used to fund local terrorist units. So this is a picture where the area in the middle is painted with cobalt blue, clean, basically the sole pigment. This is perhaps also the blame, or the thing that I have to carry with me in my conscience. And this is one of the things that we've already talked about. One of the way how an individual can start changing things is to start thinking, to change the mindset and downsize, for example, the size of the product. Actually, very like this quotation very much. Let me read it in Slovak. So many aspects of life depend on fossil fuels, except for music and love and education and happiness. These things which hardly use fossil fuels are what we must focus on. I believe that this is something that each and every one of us should have it either somewhere mounted on the wall or basically inscribed in our souls. Meyer Hellman is a sociologist, a social scientist who is known for the revolutionary ideas already dating back to the 1970s. I think he's over 80 years of age now. And if I'm not mistaken, you've selected this quotation from the interview he gave to The Guardian, and actually there's even a Slovak translation of the entire article, of the entire interview. Meyer Hillman became known for analyzing automotive transportation and the way it can be reduced. And even in his 80s, I think he used bike as means of transportation, a bicycle. And I believe this quotation speaks for itself. I don't think anything needs to be added. I worked with it in one of my works of art, one of my works when I produced musical instruments. And while we were talking about recycling old materials, for the exhibition in Plateau Gallery in Ostrava, in the Czech Republic, several artists were approached to produce some work of art from the scrap materials or residual materials donated by the local companies producing different work and different products. For example, we had a furniture company that donated the cuts of their plywood that remained after they cut the parts for the furniture, and these were used for the production of guitars, for example, for the exhibition. That's great. I believe this is your garden, right? I don't know how we're doing for time-wise. Yes, we're already behind schedule, and we have not even started upon what we wanted to talk about. To conclude, I don't know if we should go on or not, or we should take questions. Petra says that I think we should go on. All right, this is basically the latest work of art, even though this picture doesn't show the work of art yet. I inherited a garden like this, and I decided that I wanted to have a work of art, an arts project. Here, let me get back. That brings me back to the story of the beekeeper. I wanted to portray the story that lives somewhere at some sort of place which is quite dystopian, and the entire project basically takes place at this garden. And I also tried to create some sort of community space there. This is actually the beginning or the opening of the exhibition, where we cooked a vegan goulash, and it was also a meeting of friends. And what you can see in the picture is the greenhouse, which is connected to the wooden house. And in the future, my take is as follows. Basically, if the quality of air deteriorates so much that we will have to have such greenhouses in order to grow plants, and the plants actually cleaning the air there, and that's why it is connected with the house, so that the clean air can get into the house. This is a picture of what I had inside of the wooden house, the plants that grew in the garden, but also its message or some sort of simile showing the dystopian future. This is a picture from the inside of the house. There was actually this inside. There is a painting showing the dystopian future, and here you can see also the figures wearing some sort of special outfit made of aluminium. This is actually the working outfit used by workers in the steel mills, steel works or steel plants, where these people have to withstand high temperatures. And in the future, when we hit high temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, this is perhaps something that we will have to restore to as well. All right, this basically leads us to your activism and the initiative that you co-founded called No Time to Lose. The first step was call towards lay an expert public and the government of the Slovak Republic and all the relevant institutions, challenging them to pay attention to this problem, because if we don't start acting now, in 10 years' time, our world can look completely differently, and it would be the world as we don't know it. Perhaps you could tell us what was the impulse, the incentive to start doing it, to establish this community or this initiative. I think it was sort of maturing in or ripening in the people for some time. We're talking about the end of 2018 when climate summit in Katowice was held, and when the IPCC published their study. IPCC stands for International Panel for Climate Change. When the media basically interpreted the study completed by the scientists, even though they said it slightly differently, that it was interpreted in a way that we only have 12 years to do something to stop the disaster, the climate disaster. And together with the people that co-founded this initiative, these were the people who already had this in mind. And when, you remember I talked about the event or the protest by Greenpeace to stop the coal mining in Nováky. We had the challenge for, or the call for the Slovak government, signed by 2,000 people. We sent it to the representatives of our government. And what was their reaction?
Niektoré ministerstva nám poslali naspäť.
The reaction was that basically
tak tá výzva mala ako keby väčší význam v tom, že
when I look back at it call or our appeal and that letter, its significance was mainly in us opening the topic, because in the ministries responded in a very positive way. They said that they keep their fingers crossed for us, that they understand it's a very important issue, but basically it was just empty words. And since then, the situation changed quite significantly, especially when it comes to activism. And I have to say, even though we're not the most active because we've seen the establishment of the Fridays for Future movement also in Slovakia. We also have the initiative of Worried Mothers, and Extension Rebellion also has their representation in Slovakia, and there are other initiatives that are active here, and we also have NGOs working in the field of the environmental protection operating here, apart from Greenpeace, WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation, and so on. And you are also somehow associated under an umbrella structure with environmental organizations. It's called the Green Restart. And last year in September, you were even, or the representatives of different environmental NGOs were welcomed and invited by the president of the Slovak Republic, Zuzana Čaputová. And during the meeting, you discussed about the environmental issues and questions. And so what's the outcome? A year has passed since then. I don't want to talk about political preferences and so on. As an initiative, we try to be objective. You can't really be objective, but we don't want to promote some particular party. However, I can say that the feeling that I had from Madam President was very positive because she has been active in this topic and in this field for quite some time, and she's quite well versed in this area. And she issued a statement quite recently that the presidential palace will be carbon neutral within a certain period of time. But we have to bear in mind that the role of president in our society is more symbolic. So the things we are asking for, which is decreasing of the emissions of greenhouse gases, it's mainly the Slovak government that has say in it, rather than the president. The president is a very good symbol, and she has done a lot also in the international sphere and on the international scene in this matter. Okay, so basically we need to keep fingers crossed for us to have the government do something about that, and to perhaps also draw the attention of media to that topic so that it resonates within our society as much as possible. This basically brings us to the conclusion and end of our presentation. We're running a little bit longer. I have not yet received any questions on my email, so I don't know how do we take it from here. Maybe let's conclude by offering some sort of summary, or maybe what is it that you would like to say to the people watching this? What is the message? Try to look for balance and equilibrium, or to be responsible and to look for the ways towards sustainability, act responsibly in relation to ourselves, in relation to the nature, to the country, or what would be your message? Obviously, I don't want to give any instruction. This would not even be possible. But I think this issue, the climate change issue as such, is extremely complex and complicated, and everything is interrelated. We're not only talking of the climate crisis, climate change, but also biodiversity. And hand in hand with this, we have to look at social justice, because the climate crisis does not affect or impact people in the same way everywhere. We can take a global perspective where we know that especially the northern hemisphere countries have very high emissions, but the impact is more severe, the most severe and most adverse at located at the southern.
Nízkopríjmové skupiny obyvateľstva, tak vlastne tie dopady pocítia pravdepodobne o mnoho výraznejšie, o mnoho viac ovplyvňa ich každodenný život.
Určite.
A teda to, čo chcem, keď mám nejak tak niečo povedať, tak je to o tom, že by som vyzýval ľudí, aby sa o tej téme snažili čo najviac dozvedieť a pokiaľ možno z hodnoverných
people sometimes also believe hoaxes. We need to look for reliable sources of information, and once a person is well familiar with this topic, then they feel some sort of responsibility and start acting accordingly. Thank you. And this actually helps me also draw your attention to the next debate we will have in a week's time. This will be a discussion about this
klimatických zmenách.
Talk with Milan Metelec about the climate changes from the global point of view. So the things we are experiencing now and how it would.
Otovej výstavy u nás v Košiciach v rámci.
And this is going to be not very pleasant. I've actually experienced that. It was actually at the time of Oto's exhibition here in Košice. We organized a meeting with and debate, a discussion with Juraj Pecho, and everyone was basically leaving the place quite somber, and we had to process the information because the things he said were not very positive. And perhaps the last thing, I don't know if I mentioned that you're also teaching at the Faculty of Art in Košice, at the University in Košice. So you come into contact with students. Do you see this as also one of the scenes or platforms, because since you're teaching painting technique, but do you get into a situation when during these lessons you actually talk about these topics with your students? And this is somewhat complex or complicated due to the fact that since I'm a teacher, a pedagogue, I don't want to influence my students with my particular ideas. I try to be unbiased. However, I have to say that these topics do feature and do appear. For example, when we talk about pigments, and we talked about pigments, and since I'm teaching painting, I might during my lessons I might talk about this as well, and also some of the students are already somewhat familiar with my activities and with my works, so they sometimes ask questions. And I'm also quite curious to see the initiative that comes from them, because they are the generation that's going to feel the impact of the climate change the most. Thank you. I've just received an email that we do not have any questions, and we don't even have any time, even though we could talk about it for hours. I think we'll have to
Ďakujem ešte raz.
now. Anyway, I would like to thank you for taking your time here and for the discussion, which was very pleasant to speak for myself. And I hope all of the people who listened or watch to this or watched it also had a nice time. And once again, I would like to invite you to the next debate in a week's time on the 29th of September. Josef Pecho will be talking to Maciej Metelet. And thank you for having me, and thank you for a very pleasant talk. Thank you. So good evening to all of you.